Welcome back to the show. Today, we're going deep on the future of tourism.
Sounds exciting.
Yeah, it's something I think we're all thinking about already, and we've got a lot to dig into here today.
Wait.
Reports from the World Travel and Tourism Council, we've got McKinsey, articles, even some destination planning documents.
Oh, that's quite the stack.
It is. And, they all paint a picture of, well, incredible growth.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, with that come challenges.
Of course, yeah.
How do we balance that growth with, I guess, protecting the very places and cultures that, make these destinations special in the first place?
It's a fascinating question. Travel has this incredible power to connect us, boost economies, and expose us to new cultures.
It does, yeah.
And yet, if it's not managed carefully, it can also destroy the very things that make it so appealing.
Exactly. And these sources, they don't shy away from over-tourism.
No, they don't.
The UNWTO predicts that by 2030, we'll see 1.8 billion
Wow.
international tourist arrivals annually.
That's a pretty staggering number.
It is.
It really underscores the need, I think, for some proactive solutions.
Absolutely.
One thing that struck me while reviewing these sources was the sheer variety of consequences that can stem from unmanaged tourism growth.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about like crowded beaches
Right.
or long lines at museums,
Sure.
but genuine environmental damage, social tensions.
Right, like Iceland having to limit access to some of its natural wonders.
Exactly. Or Thailand closing off entire islands.
Yeah, it feels like a lose-lose situation.
It does.
The environment suffers, and the tourists end up having a less enjoyable experience.
Absolutely. And we can't forget about the impact on local communities.
That's right.
Imagine, dealing with a constant influx of tourists.
Yeah.
Crowding your streets, driving up housing costs, and sometimes even, disrespecting local customs and traditions.
It's that Venice exodus.
Yeah,
That you mentioned before, right? Where residents are leaving because they just can't handle it anymore.
precisely.
Yeah.
And what makes this even more challenging is that reliable data on overcrowding is, well, surprisingly scarce.
Really?
It's like trying to solve a puzzle without all the pieces.
So how do we even begin to tackle this problem?
Yeah.
I mean, do these sources offer any solutions?
Fortunately, yes.
Okay, good.
The McKinsey report in particular lays out 4 key strategies for managing tourism growth.
Okay.
And what's great is these strategies can apply whether a destination is already grappling with over-tourism or just preparing for future growth.
Okay, so let's dive in. What's the first step?
Well, first and foremost, destinations need to build a comprehensive fact base. This means gathering granular data
Okay.
on everything from visitor numbers and spending habits to seasonal trends and environmental impact.
That makes sense. You can't solve a problem without understanding it first.
Right.
But gathering all that data sounds like a pretty massive undertaking.
It can be, but it's essential. You need that foundation for effective decision-making.
Sure.
Once you have a clear picture of the situation, you can move on to the next strategy, which is developing a clear vision and strategy.
So this is where destinations start thinking about what kind of tourism they want or...
Exactly. It's about defining the desired future state for tourism, setting measurable targets, and importantly, determining the carrying capacity of the destination. So in other words, figuring out how much tourism a place can handle without those negative consequences.
That sounds like it requires a lot of careful planning and coordination between, well, different groups, right?
You're absolutely right. And that brings us to the third strategy, establishing effective governance.
Okay.
This is about creating a framework for collaboration between government agencies, tourism businesses, and crucially, local communities.
So it's not just about top-down regulations, but bringing everyone together to create, well, I guess a more sustainable approach.
Precisely. One interesting trend we're seeing is the evolution of destination marketing organizations, or DMOs,
Okay.
into destination management organizations.
Okay, so they're taking on...
Right, so these DMOs, they take a more holistic approach,
Got it.
focusing on managing tourism in a way that benefits all stakeholders.
Okay, so we've got the data, the vision, the collaborative framework. What's the final piece?
Well, the fourth and final strategy is where the rubber meets the road. Implementing a diverse set of tactical actions. Think of this as a toolbox filled with different strategies for managing visitor flows and mitigating those negative impacts.
Okay, so it's not just about talking the talk, it's walking the walk. I'm really interested to hear about some of these tactical actions. Where do we even begin with a toolbox that big?
Well, the report breaks these tactics down into 4 categories: smoothing, spreading, regulating, and innovating. Each one offers unique tools for managing tourism sustainably.
Okay, I like that. That gives us a good framework to work with. Let's start with smoothing. What does that entail?
So, smoothing is all about distributing tourists more evenly over time, to avoid those overwhelming peaks.
Okay.
For example, many destinations are encouraging travel during the shoulder seasons,
Oh.
those periods just before or after the peak season when crowds are smaller.
So instead of everyone flocking to the beach in July,
Exactly.
destinations are highlighting like the beauty of a spring hike or a fall foliage tour.
Exactly. And Iceland, for example, is a great example of this. They've been actively promoting their winter attractions, like the Northern Lights,
Oh,
to attract visitors during the traditionally slower months.
that's great. Yeah, it's a win-win, right? Tourists get to experience the destination without the crowds, and the local economy benefits from a more consistent flow of visitors. But what about those places that are already dealing with peak crowds, even during the shoulder seasons? What's in the smoothing toolbox for them?
Right, so that's where things like reservation systems and timed entry tickets come into play. Theme parks, for example, have become incredibly sophisticated in managing daily crowds, using these tools to prevent bottlenecks and ensure a smoother visitor experience.
That makes sense. Yeah, I actually experienced something similar while hiking the Milford Track in New Zealand. They limit the number of hikers allowed on the trail each day.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, to preserve the natural environment and ensure that everyone has a quality experience.
That's a perfect example of smoothing in action. By controlling the flow of visitors, they're able to protect the trail and enhance the overall visitor experience. But smoothing is just one tool in the toolbox.
Right, what about spreading? What does that involve?
Spreading is about encouraging tourists to venture beyond the typical hotspots and explore different areas within a destination.
So alleviating pressure on those overcrowded areas while also giving visitors a more authentic experience.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that.
Visit Britain, for example, has a campaign called Experience London like a Londoner.
I love that.
They encourage visitors to, skip the crowded tourist traps and explore the city's diverse neighborhoods, interacting with locals, discovering hidden gems.
Right, it's like getting a behind-the-scenes glimpse of the city.
Exactly. What about a destination like Venice?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really struggling with overtourism. Are there any spreading strategies that could work in a place that's already so densely packed?
Yeah, it's hard to imagine.
It is, but they're trying some interesting things. They have a campaign called detourism, which promotes slow and sustainable tourism,
Interesting.
encourages travelers to skip the crowded Rialto Bridge, St. Mark's Square, and instead discover the city's quieter neighborhoods. Visit local artisan workshops. Really experience Venice like a local.
I like that. Spreading seems like it could be an effective strategy for Iceland, too.
You're absolutely right. Iceland actually has a dedicated fund called the Tourist Site Protection Fund.
Oh.
It's financed through a combination of an accommodation tax and direct government funding. And it's used to develop new attractions and improve infrastructure in lesser-known areas. It's encouraging visitors to spread out across the country.
So they're taking that revenue generated from tourism and reinvesting it back into protecting the environment and creating a more sustainable tourism landscape.
Precisely. And speaking of managing revenue, one of the most discussed tactics for regulating tourism is the implementation of tourist taxes.
Yeah, that's something I've heard a lot about. There's a lot of debate surrounding it. Some people see it as a necessary tool,
Right.
while others worry that it could make travel less accessible.
You've hit on a key point there. While tourist taxes can be a powerful tool for generating revenue to support sustainable tourism initiatives, there are definitely ethical considerations.
It seems like striking that balance between protecting a destination and ensuring that travel remains accessible to everyone is a recurring theme.
You're absolutely right. It's a delicate balancing act. There are no easy answers. But by carefully considering the potential impacts of each tactic and engaging in open and honest dialogue with all stakeholders, destinations can work towards a more sustainable and equitable future for tourism.
So we've covered a lot of ground already, but it feels like we've only just scratched the surface of regulating. What other tools are in that part of the toolbox?
Well, regulating encompasses a wide range of actions. From setting limits on the number of visitors allowed in certain areas to implementing curfews or even banning specific activities.
So Amsterdam banning new tourist shops in the city center
Exactly.
to kind of preserve the character of that area.
Exactly. Or Rome banning drinking on the streets at night to curb rowdy behavior.
It makes sense. Yeah, if things get out of control, it can sour the experience for everyone.
Exactly. But, as we touched on earlier, these types of regulations often raise ethical questions about fairness and access.
It's a complex issue, and it seems like there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Each destination needs to consider its own circumstances
Absolutely.
and find the right balance for them.
Every destination is unique. What works in one place might not work in another. That's why it's so important to have a diverse set of tools at your disposal.
And that brings us to the final category of tactical actions. Innovating.
Yeah.
This sounds like it could be really exciting, especially with all the technological advancements we're seeing.
Absolutely. Technology is playing an increasingly important role in managing tourism sustainably.
Yeah.
For instance, cities like Amsterdam are using apps that show visitors real-time wait times at attractions and suggest alternative places to visit, helping to alleviate crowding at those popular spots.
That's brilliant.
And Google Maps even has a popular times feature that uses anonymized location data to show you how crowded a place is in real time.
Okay, that's seriously handy. It's like having a personal crowd avoidance assistant in your pocket.
Exactly. And technology isn't just about convenience for tourists. It can also be used to gather valuable data that helps destinations understand visitor behavior and make more informed decisions.
It's like that old saying, knowledge is power. The more we know, the better equipped we are to find solutions.
Precisely. And all of these strategies, all of these tactical actions, they ultimately feed into this broader concept that's at the heart of sustainable tourism: destination stewardship.
Okay, what exactly does destination stewardship mean?
It's a holistic approach that recognizes the interconnectedness of tourism's impacts and emphasizes collaboration, long-term thinking, and shared responsibility.
So it's moving away from that us versus them mentality and towards a more collaborative, integrated approach.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that everyone has a stake in the future of tourism, from the visitors themselves to the local communities, businesses, and the environment.
That makes a lot of sense. But how does this idea of destination stewardship play out in practice? What does it look like on the ground?
It involves creating a shared vision for tourism, involving all stakeholders in the decision-making process, and taking responsibility for the long-term well-being of the destination.
It sounds like a pretty idealistic vision.
It is.
But are there any real-world examples of destinations that are successfully implementing this?
Absolutely. In fact, we've already touched on a few. Iceland's Tourist Site Protection Fund, for instance, is a great illustration of destination stewardship in action.
Right, they're using tourism revenue to protect the environment, develop new attractions in a way that benefits both visitors and locals. What are some other examples of destinations that are, I guess, leading the way?
Well, Botswana, for example, has a tourism industry training fund that uses a small levy on accommodation to fund training courses for local hospitality staff.
Interesting.
It's a great way to invest in the workforce and improve the quality of service, while also ensuring that tourism benefits local communities.
That's brilliant. It's
Yeah.
like a virtuous cycle where tourism dollars are used to create opportunities for local people, which in turn leads to a better tourism experience for everyone. What are some other creative ways destinations are funding these, sustainable tourism initiatives?
Well, aside from tourist taxes, crowdfunding is becoming increasingly popular, especially for smaller scale projects, like, building public restrooms, improving signage, or creating new walking trails.
I love that. It's like a collective effort to improve the destination, make it more welcoming for both visitors and locals. But even with all these great ideas, it seems like there are still some, thorny ethical questions that need to be addressed.
You're absolutely right. One of the sources we looked at specifically tackles those questions about access and fairness.
Okay.
It acknowledges that limiting visitor numbers might reduce environmental damage and overcrowding, but could also make the destination more exclusive.
Right. That's a tough one. How do you balance the desire to protect a place with the idea that travel should be accessible to everyone?
It's a delicate balance, and there are no easy answers. One suggestion is to create a tiered system
Okay.
where certain areas or experiences are reserved for those willing to pay a premium, while other areas remain accessible to everyone.
So like a pay-to-play model, but with a portion of the revenue going towards preserving the natural and cultural heritage of the destination? Interesting.
It's definitely a concept worth exploring.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it comes down to making conscious choices about how we manage tourism and ensuring that those choices benefit both people and the planet.
Well, we've certainly covered a lot of ground in this, well, first part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
From the challenges of over-tourism to the promise of sustainable practices, it's clear that the future of tourism is at a crossroads.
What strikes me is how interconnected all these issues are.
Yeah.
We've talked about climate change, social impact, economic development, even technology's role. It's all part of the same complex equation.
And it's not just about finding the right solutions, it's about implementation.
Yes.
How do we move from these great ideas to actually making a difference?
One key takeaway from our deep dive so far is the importance of collaboration. Governments, businesses, local communities, and even tourists themselves
Right.
need to work together.
It's like we're all stakeholders in this global travel adventure.
Exactly. And we need to move beyond short-term thinking, embrace a long-term vision for destination stewardship, taking responsibility for those environmental and social impacts, and making choices that benefit both people and the planet.
Yeah, it's inspiring to see destinations like Iceland, Botswana, New Zealand taking those steps, coming up with these innovative solutions.
And it's not just about government initiatives. There's a growing awareness within the tourism industry itself. More and more businesses are recognizing the importance of sustainability, incorporating eco-friendly practices into their operations.
We're seeing hotels reduce their water consumption, tour operators minimizing their carbon footprint, even cruise lines taking steps to protect marine ecosystems.
Absolutely. And, consumer demand is playing a big role in this shift, too.
Oh, for sure.
Travelers are becoming more discerning. They're actively seeking out sustainable travel options.
Absolutely.
They want to know that their vacation isn't harming the planet.
It's the rise of the conscious traveler.
Exactly.
People who want to explore the world, but do it in a way that aligns with their values.
Exactly. And this growing demand for sustainable tourism experiences is creating new opportunities for those businesses that are committed to responsible practices.
So it's a win-win. Travelers get to experience the world in a more meaningful way, and destinations benefit from tourism that's sustainable, supports their long-term well-being.
It's about creating a virtuous cycle where tourism becomes a force for positive change.
Well said. So after all this, what's the one thing you want our listener to take away?
I think the most important takeaway is that the choices we make as travelers, as businesses, as global citizens have a real impact.
It's about being mindful of our footprint,
Exactly.
literally and figuratively.
By embracing those principles of sustainable tourism, supporting those who are working to protect our planet's incredible destinations, we can ensure that future generations will have the opportunity to experience the same wonder and joy of travel that we do.
Well said. That's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
And to our listener, we hope this has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to think a little bit differently about the way you travel. Remember, every journey, no matter how big or small, has the potential to make a difference. So go explore, be mindful, and help us create a more sustainable future for tourism, one adventure at a time.
Picking up where we left off, let's look at how some destinations are using these tactics to manage tourism growth. One that stood out to me was smoothing,
Right.
distributing tourists more evenly.
Yeah, we talked about Iceland promoting their winter attractions to even out those visitor numbers.
Exactly. And it's not just about the season. Smoothing can also be about managing those daily crowds. Think about theme parks, right?
Oh, yeah.
How they use timed entry tickets and reservation systems.
It might seem like a small tweak, but it really does make a difference.
A huge difference. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, instead of feeling like you're battling crowds, you can actually relax and enjoy things.
Right.
When I hiked the Milford Track in New Zealand, they limit the number of hikers each day.
Right.
And it made it so much more peaceful.
Like a great example.
Mm.
A simple regulation can have such a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Benefits the environment,
Right.
a visitor experience.
What are some other interesting approaches you saw? To smoothing, I mean.
Well, one thing that popped up was the use of dynamic pricing.
Okay.
Some museums and attractions are charging higher prices during peak hours,
Right.
offering discounts during off-peak times.
I mean, it incentivizes people to go at less crowded times.
Exactly, using market forces, right,
Mm.
to nudge people towards more sustainable choices.
Yeah, as long as it's, well, I guess communicated clearly.
Exactly. Transparency is key. People are more likely to accept those price differences if they understand that it's part of that bigger effort.
Right, right. Okay, so we've seen how smoothing can work. What about spreading? How are destinations encouraging tourists to explore different areas?
Well, one campaign that really impressed me was Visit Britons.
Okay.
Experience London like a Londoner.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Encourages visitors to step outside of that typical tourist bubble. Explore those diverse neighborhoods, interact with locals, discover hidden gems.
I love that. I remember I found this charming little bookshop tucked away in a quiet neighborhood,
Yeah.
and it ended up being one of the highlights of my trip,
Okay.
which wouldn't have happened if I'd stuck to the main tourist areas.
Exactly, those unexpected discoveries, right?
Yeah.
That often make travel so memorable.
Yeah.
And destinations are starting to realize that they can use that desire for authenticity to their advantage.
So it's not about telling tourists where not to go, it's enticing them with compelling alternatives.
Exactly. And a great example of this is Venice's detourism campaign.
Oh, right.
They're promoting slower, more sustainable ways to experience the city.
Yeah, really experience it, not just, see it.
Exactly. Encouraging visitors to explore those quieter canals, visit local artisan workshops, immerse themselves in the culture.
I like that. And it seems like spreading would work really well in Iceland, too.
Right. And they've been proactive. They've been using that tourist site protection fund
Uh-huh.
to protect fragile areas,
Right.
but also to develop new attractions and improve infrastructure in those lesser-known regions.
So they're not just trying to contain tourism, they're actively shaping it.
Exactly. And it's a great example of how strategic investment can really play a key role in managing tourism sustainably. But spreading alone isn't always enough.
Right, that's where regulating comes in. It can be a bit of a touchy subject,
It can.
but it's an important part of the toolbox.
It is. And the key is finding that balance between protecting a destination and making sure it remains accessible.
Right, that's the hard part. Amsterdam, for example, banned new tourist shops in the city center. Pretty bold move.
It is, yeah.
But it's aimed at preserving the character of the city, preventing it from becoming just a generic tourist trap.
Absolutely. And cities like Barcelona, they've been dealing with Airbnb and its impact on housing.
Oh, right.
I've been putting regulations in place
Yeah.
to try and strike that balance.
Tourism can't come at the cost of, well, displacing the very people who make a destination so special.
You got it. And sometimes regulating means addressing behaviors that can be detrimental to the quality of life, even for tourists.
Oh, sure.
Rome, for example, has banned drinking on the streets at night.
Makes sense. Yeah, if things get out of control, it can really sour the experience.
Exactly. But as we talked about, every regulation comes with ethical considerations.
Right. It's a balancing act for sure.
It is. Destinations need to be really thoughtful.
It seems like there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Each destination has to find its own path.
Absolutely. And that's where innovating comes into play.
This is where technology can really shine, right?
It is.
I mean, we talked about how apps can help visitors avoid crowds.
Right.
What other innovations are out there?
One thing is the use of AI
Okay.
to analyze tourism data, identify potential problems before they even arise.
So it's like a crystal ball.
It is, yeah. It can predict tourism trends.
So destinations can prepare.
Right. And AI can also personalize the tourist experience,
Oh,
recommending activities, attractions that align with their interests, helping to spread visitors more evenly across the destination.
it's like having a personal travel concierge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's using technology to create a more seamless,
Yeah.
sustainable, enjoyable experience for everyone.
This has been incredibly insightful. I'm seeing the world of travel in a whole new light.
That's great to hear. And it highlights something crucial. Sustainable tourism isn't just about government policies.
Right.
It's about choices we make as individual travelers, businesses, and communities.
We all have a role to play.
Exactly. That's the heart of destination stewardship,
Yeah.
which we'll talk more about in a bit.
Okay, so we've talked about the challenges, dug into those tactical actions, smoothing, spreading, regulating, and innovating. Now let's talk about destination stewardship.
Yeah, it really is the philosophy behind all these efforts.
So it's more than just counting those tourist dollars.
It is, yeah. It's seeing tourism not just as an economic activity, but as this complex ecosystem with interconnected impacts.
Okay, so looking beyond the money and considering the impact on communities, the environment, even the culture of a place.
Exactly. Destination stewardship recognizes that everyone involved, governments, businesses, local communities, even the tourists themselves, we're all stakeholders. with a shared responsibility for the well-being of that destination.
That shared responsibility part is so important. It's easy to blame, tourists for overcrowding or businesses for putting profit over sustainability. But this suggests that we all need to work together to find solutions.
Absolutely. It's about collaboration, creating a more collaborative approach where everyone has a voice.
How do you actually put this into practice, though? I mean, it sounds great in theory, but what does it look like in the real world?
Well, we've already seen some good examples.
Yeah.
Think about Iceland's Tourist Site Protection Fund. That's destination stewardship in action, using tourism revenue to protect the environment and develop new attractions that benefit everyone.
Right, so it's not just about saying no to tourism, it's about using those resources to create a more sustainable model.
Exactly. And Botswana's Tourism Industry Training Fund is another great one, using a small fee to fund training courses for local people, making sure they benefit.
It's about empowering those local people
Exactly.
to be a part of the industry, not just, I guess, watching from the sidelines.
Yeah. And even things like crowdfunding campaigns
Right.
to improve things.
Yeah, those small community initiatives can make a big difference.
It's that ground-up approach
Yeah.
that sets destination stewardship apart, empowering communities to take ownership, making sure tourism aligns with their values.
But it feels like there will always be those tension points, right? Balancing the economics with the need to protect a destination.
There will be challenges, for sure, but destination stewardship gives us a way to navigate those tensions. It's about thinking long-term.
Not just today, but making sure tourism is sustainable for future generations.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And that requires a change in mindset from all of us.
Right, being mindful of our impact, both literally and figuratively.
Absolutely. Making choices that minimize our impact.
Choosing to support sustainable businesses, respecting local cultures.
Seeing ourselves as, guests, not just
As
tourists.
guests in someone else's home. Yeah, I like that.
It's about respect.
This has been eye-opening. It feels like we've covered so much.
We have. And the big takeaway for me is that the future of tourism is up to us.
It's not predetermined. It's something we're all shaping.
Right. So it's not about waiting for someone else to fix it. It's about each of us doing our part.
And there are people out there already doing it.
There are, yeah. We're seeing a movement toward more sustainable tourism. Travelers are seeking out eco-friendly options. Businesses are changing their practices.
It feels like we're starting to turn things around.
We are, but we can't let up. These challenges are real, and they require ongoing effort.
So what do you want our listener to take away from all of this?
Travel is a powerful thing.
It is.
It connects us, broadens our horizons, inspires us. But it's a privilege, not a right, and it comes with responsibilities.
We need to be mindful.
We do. If we embrace those principles of destination stewardship and support those working towards a more sustainable future, we can make sure that this incredible gift of travel continues to enrich our lives and our world for generations to come.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
And to our listener, we hope you found this deep dive as thought-provoking as we did. Remember, every journey, no matter how big or small, has the power to make a difference. So get out there, explore, be mindful, and let's create a world where tourism is a force for good.